Welcome to One on One with Mitch Lafon, and joining me on this episode, it is original Tygers of Pan Tang singer and former Neat Records owner Jess Cox. We talk about his time with the band and, of course, the importance of Neat Records and a lot more. Before checking out Jess, please check me out on Twitter at Mitch Lafon, MITCHLAFON, One on One Mitch Lafon on Facebook, paypal.me/Mitch Lafon, should you care to support the podcast. And with that, here is the one, the only, Jess Cox. We are speaking with Jess Cox, who happens to be in charge of Metal Nation Records, also worked with Neat, or owned Neat Records, and of course was the first singer in Tygers of Pan Tang. Good day, Jess. Pleasure to speak with you.
Yep. Hello to you too.
So let's start with the present. Tell me a little bit about Metal Nation Records and what is sort of that mission statement for the label.
Well, after I supposedly retired from bands back in, well, it was 87, I guess, 88. I actually did a degree in media at the University of Newcastle, which is my hometown. And when I came out in 91, I got involved with Neat Records, just helping the owner to get things on track there, because the label had suffered somewhat over the 90s with the end of the new British heavy metal and the onslaught of the American thrash labels and bands, because essentially it was a new British heavy metal label. So I reactivated that for him, and then as time went on, we ended up being partners, and I actually owned the label through the 90s, and once I actually sold that to Sanctuary PLC, which is Iron Maiden's company, in 2001. And I had a small label which I'd been running at the same time to, ironically, carry the Tygers of Pan Tang albums from MCA. But once I was solo, as it were, with that label, I just changed the name, quite frankly. I just thought Edgy Records was a bit, wasn't great. So I came up with the idea of Metal Nation Records. So in 2001, Edgy Records basically changed to Metal Nation Records, and that's where I am now.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about Edgy and of course Metal Nation and the Tygers of Pan Tang. You were with the band on the first album, Wildcat. How did you maintain your relationship to get to a point where you would be re-releasing their first four albums later on?
Well, I mean, we were four young guys, basically, in a small seaside town in the northeast of England called Whitley Bay. And we all lived within a few streets of each other. We kind of formed the band together in 1979. So, we right from the start. I mean, we didn't even have any songs when we formed the band. We just... we used to do covers. We used to do, I remember we used to do the Beatles. I saw us standing there, and amongst other things, a bit more metal-y, Motorhead and whatever. But once we got into the music industry, when we got signed in, well, Neat Records was the first label to sign us, actually, strangely enough. We did one single with them in 1979, and it got picked up by MCA Records. I think they were just going to do a distribution on it, but things lifted up and they wanted us full time, so we signed to MCA America. And when the band did finally end, and I came into the music industry in 91 after my degree, and I formed Edgy Records as a sideline from Neat Records to carry the Tygers albums. Obviously, that was nothing to do with the band. That was a business situation with MCA Records, where I literally licensed the albums from them, because obviously MCA had the rights and they could do what they wanted. and I licensed it. So I put together a nice package of 4 albums, but I put all the bonus tracks on from A and B sides, and I think it was like 65 archive photographs and lyrics, sleeve notes by the band. I mean, I got the guys to write sleeve notes. They'd all dispersed to the 4 winds by then, as it were. Rob Weir was I think he was a ticket inspector on the local trains at that point. And Rocky, the bass player, was a solicitor in London and still is. And the drummer was I think he'd been playing with Kid Creole and the Coconuts, from what I remember. But I know he was doing like trips in Miami on these kind of cruise ships and things as a backing drummer. I think that's where he was at. And obviously John Sykes was, stratospheric somewhere with Whitesnake or Lizzie or somebody. So nobody, we were kind of all over the place. So, I mean, there was nobody to even discuss me doing what I was going to do anyway, even if I needed to, but as I say, I didn't, because it was a straight business deal between my label and MCA Records.
Yeah, good old MCA. Let's go back to the first album, Wildcat. What can you sort of tell me about that putting it together and working with Chris Tangrides?
Well, as I say, when we first got together in '78, we had no songs, so we started writing just because we thought we should, basically. And we came up with "Don't Touch Me There" was the first thing we came up with, which happened to be the first single on Neat Records. I think we were just playing around. We were just kids. I mean, we were just in a band. It was different. It was a different world then. People got to remember. It was not like now. It's very competitive, and people know what they want and how to be a rock star, and they work at A to Z and go through all these magical things that are around now, like the internet and such. Like, I mean, you were locked in a little town, and that was it. I mean, there was no internet. You just didn't hear anything about nothing. So, I mean, we were just playing in our own town quite merrily as a local band, just being kids. And for whatever reason, this new British heavy metal came along, and we got tied up into all that. So it was all just a bit of luck. I mean, from forming to being signed by MCA was like 18 months, so... But we'd written songs in that 18 months on our local rehearsals at the local church hall, pretty much like any other young band does. And we had all these songs ready. So when we were signed, we demoed them actually. At Neat Records, whilst we did the first single there, we went in and did a live recording and a couple of demos. All which appeared on a later album called First Kill, which I released with Neat Records in 1996. But anyway, we demoed all these tracks, and then when we were signed for MCA, we chose 10 of them to go on the Wildcat album, because we were signed. I think it was April 1980. We got properly signed. And we went straight on tour, and then after the tours, we did back-to-back tours with Saxon, Iron Maiden, Def Leppard, I seem to remember. We did a big Reading festival, and then we went into the studio and recorded the first album with Chris. Obviously, Chris was assigned to us, basically, because of his work with other bands like Lizzie and Priest and whatever he'd done. And... we recorded it at the Morgan Studios in London, and Chris was our first producer really at Neat Records, which just had a house engineer who kind of twiddled the knobs, as it were. Chris was like a proper producer, and he was a great guy. He's a very nice, pleasant fella. Knew how to get the best out of everybody, as all these top producers do. Hard work, I seem to remember. A lot of sitting around listening to overdubs. Yeah, that was that. And we came out with the album, which came out we did Reading Festival in the August, so it must have come out that same month. I guess, and it ended, straight in the top 20 in the UK, which was unbelievable. And we went off on our first headline tour of the UK after that.
Which is where I find the story gets a little puzzling, because here you are with sort of a massive hit. It's a top 20 album. Songs like Don't Touch Me There, Susie Smiled, Wildcats. Here we are in 2016. They still hold up. Why didn't the band achieve a greater success in a style of a Def Leppard or an Iron Maiden? Why was the band sort of, I don't want to say stuck in the UK, but why didn't you get North America acceptance?
Yeah, well, this is the great unanswered question, and of course, as musicians, you don't get to know why. MCA obviously just didn't feel they could. I don't know. They didn't push us like EMI were pushing Iron Maiden and Phonogram with Def Leppard. I mean, I know the popularity was there because I heard it then, and I've heard it every day since of somebody or other. It seems, obviously the album's got over there. Everybody seems to know Wildcat, but we didn't. It's a shame because I think that, especially when John Sykes joined, the band became, even better. I'm sure we could have done very well. I mean, at the time when you're kids, all these things just happen around you, and you just get on with it, and you don't think of the future necessarily. It's only when you're older and you look back, and you can go, only if, I wonder, because I think, we could have gone and done more. I mean, that's for sure. But as I say, I don't know why. I was never privy to why that never happened. Just MCA weren't equipped maybe to do that, or didn't want to do that. I don't know. That needs to be a question put to them.
It really does. Now, the other thing that's puzzling is here you have this sort of major album going on, again, top 20. You're the vocalist, and they decide on Spellbound to change. Why do you think they didn't sort of keep the winning formula and keep you with the band?
I think that MCA weren't really a metal label as such. I mean, they did have one or two bands in the States, but who weren't really metal. I mean, it was the new wave of British heavy metal, and English metal was very distinctly English. It was very heavy metal. I mean, we came also from a punk background as well. So you've got like Judas Priest and the Sex Pistols mixed up in there, and it was all, the Clash and whatever else. It was a hodgepodge. It wasn't, the American market at the time was more high harmony rock thing. I know the thrash bay thing happened pretty soon after that, but whilst we were around initially in 1980, there was none of that. So they were essentially a kind of country and westerny blues label, really, and I really don't think they knew what to do with us, quite frankly. I think we just got signed as one of their quota of like, well, okay, this new British heavy metal's happening, we need some of these. What's going around? Okay, well, there's one, Tygers Of Pan Tang, we'll have them. Def Leppard, Diamond Head, we'll have that one. So they just took a couple of bands on the label. It was kind of like throw it at the wall, see if it sticks, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. If it does, it does. They didn't know what to do, and I think they were constantly looking at the idea of trying to get a hit single. They sent us in the studio to write a hit single at one point. During the Wildcat time, we went in the studio and wrote Rock and Roll Man, which wasn't on the album. It was essentially to try and get a hit single. It did. It did very well here in the UK, but they were looking all the time at changing the band from day one. I think they wanted this, and of course, when they saw Def Leppard go stratospheric, I think that made their mind up, and they changed the band. Sadly, what they did do was alienate all the hardcore metalheads who were into the band, because they changed it so much. I mean, by the fourth album, which was only in an 18-month period. We have to remember. I mean, these albums pretty much came out in a year and a half. These 4 albums, or to 2 years tops. To the Cage. Now the band were unrecognizable by the 4th album. I mean, that was a real go at what we call the Radio 1 housewife market here in the UK, which was basically trying to get Blanket play on Radio 1 and appeal to the housewife, as it were. But they failed. It didn't happen. But unfortunately, as I say, that alienated their fan base, so they were left in limbo with nothing, and that the band just imploded. So I guess it was MCA's mismanagement of the band, sadly, that caused this. But I suspect the band could have gone on and done a lot more if they just used the bullets that they had at the time.
Yeah, I think so. And then, of course, by the time you get to Burning in the Shade, the band becomes sort of an Asia or Wham kind of knockoff by then. Were you at all involved in Spellbound? Had you recorded any demos or written any other songs, or were you totally divested from the band at that point?
Well, I obviously lived with John Sykes. You don't know that, but I did live with John Sykes after the band, even when I left. John and I shared a flat together for years, and we had recording gear there, and we used to muck around together. I mean, let's put it this way, I recognize little bits and pieces on Spellbound, but we'll just leave it at that. I didn't get credited at all during that period with anything, but it was still you'll see, it was still fairly rocky-ish. I know it changed quite a bit, but it was still a fairly rocky album. Not Wildcat, fair enough, but it was still, and it still held up, that one, as well, as a great album by the fans. I think it was the 3rd one, the Crazy Nights, that started to get a little bit poppier, and then the 4th, of course, The Cage was, it was just, I don't know what that was. That was like an AOR album. He actually didn't even write that album. It was writers were brought in to write it. I know some of the band names appear on the tracks, but essentially you'll see John Parr on there, and Leva Stroller, obviously, Love Potion number 9, and there was one of the in-house writers from Neat on there as well, Steve Thompson, who had a hit with a band called, I forget the name of the band, but the song was called Hurry Home. It was a very bland hit. But, there were songwriters involved on the 4th album. It was pretty obvious what MC were doing there, but I was essentially involved slightly on the 2nd album, I would say, yes, but Wildcat was really the album that Rob and I wrote, and it's also essentially, as you say, Wildcat is held up still now today and stands up, but The Cage it's weird, you put it on, it's so dated, it really sounds like 1984, where Wildcat, I think, if that album came out now, people would still, cock an ear to it and go, oh, this is a bit sort of crazy, it sounds good, but who knows.
Yeah, and what I find interesting about The Cage and Crazy Nights is that they were moving in this more AOR-friendly, as we call it now, soccer mom style, but music hadn't really gotten there yet. We were still, in Heaven and Hell and Dio and Sabbath and Blizzard of Oz, and we hadn't gotten to the mid-'80s yet, and it was almost like they were ahead of the curve in terms of trying to write these pop singles, It was interesting.
Well, Love Potion number 9 is fabulous. I love it. The track, I think, John's guitar on there is superb. I know John's not credited as being on there, but he is. And it's, it's a fabulous song. But the album as a whole, I just find it a bit bland. And then when they went on to those other albums, as you say, The Wreckage and Burning in the Shade, which I think was 85, 87. They were just, I don't know what band that was. It wasn't the Tigers. But I mean, it's the early Tiger that seems to be remembered fondly and wanted still. So I think that says, says everything. I mean, I was out playing on last weekend at a thing called Hard Rock Hell, which was a big festival here in Sheffield, and it was a sold-out show, and people were just, deliriously happy, to hear the Wildcat songs done by, the singer from the original singer. So, it's nobody to a man has ever mentioned anything about any other album, as far as I know, and to me. And I mean, I work in the music industry. This is what I do for a living. This has been my job all my life. I've had no other job, so I'm talking to people around the world constantly, and obviously the fans from then are now, heads of labels and MDs at magazines, and they're all. Which helps greatly. It's fantastic, but obviously I'm reminded every day. I can't hide. I've got such a name that I can't hide behind like a John Smith or something, which is quite common. I mean, Jess Cox is pretty uncommon, so everybody knows it's me. So the first thing is usually the words out of their mouth is, "Oh yeah, Wildcat," and it's well, what happened to this and what happened with that, and oh, I hate the cage. I know it went from. I remember in the European polls they had, within 6 months, I think, from Wildcat to, whatever it was, from Wildcat to the Cage. And we went from number one band in Europe to the worst band in Europe. Bottom. That's how far we fell so quickly.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. John Sykes, you mentioned John. He is, of course, one of the greatest rock guitarists, having done a stint with, of course, Whitesnake, Blue Murder, Thin Lizzy. Do you still talk to John, and how do you sort of rate him as a guitarist?
Oh, well, I rate him extremely high, massively high. I mean, he lived and breathed it. As I say, we were best friends, and we shared a flat together for years. In fact, when he wanted to join Ozzy originally, when Randy Rhoads died. In fact, the day he died, we went out and bought all of Ozzy's albums and went back to our flat, and we just kept dropping them on the solos, and John kept learning each solo by pat, and I even wrote his letter for him, "Dear Mr. Osbourne, my name is John Sykes, I'm 24 years old, I would like to join your band," type thing, because we gave this to Chris, because Chris Tangarides had given us the nod and said, "Oh, Ozzy wants John," and but we went for the audition, and Ozzy wasn't well, if you know what I mean, and it didn't quite work out. But Sharon, I know, rang us later and said, "Oh, Joe, Ozzy's not well. He's gone to hospital. We want you to join the band," but it frightened him so much by then that he didn't want to join. So he ended up joining Phil Lynnett's band to do a solo tour, but then Phil thought he was so great he got him into Lizzy, and then Lizzy toured in Europe on their final goodbye tour. They supported Whitesnake, and then Coverdale had said to John, "When you finished here, come and join me in Whitesnake." So it was just stratospheric for him. I mean, he went from a young guy in Blackpool. He was working on a building site, literally carrying bricks up and down a ladder on his back. That's when we found him, and to this, superstar. He had to move to America on the night before the Whitesnake album came out, because he became a millionaire overnight on pre-sales alone, and he went there as a tax exile. So he just went colossal. But he deserved it. He was a fabulous guitar. Is a fabulous guitar player. He, as I say, that's all he lived for, was his guitar. He used to walk around the house with it on his neck, and we were watching TV, and all I could hear was John playing his guitar next to me. Didn't have a mic. It wasn't plugged in or anything, but the dedication was colossal, and he'd played it all his life, because I mean, he used to tell me that I think he didn't really go to school, and his parents split, and he got sent to Spain to brought up with his uncle who played guitar. And because he wasn't going to school, all he did was concentrate on playing guitar all through his young life. And I guess that's why he became so fabulous at it, you know. But he kind of disappeared, I suppose, after Whitesnake. He should have. There was a lot more. I think there was a lot more in him to do, but I just don't think he had the guidance. And yeah, I have spoken to him over his career. He asked me certain times, "Oh, should I do this? Should I do that?" And I've suggested things to him, which he's taken on. But the last time we saw each other actually was 2000 and, let's see, my son was born, so it was 2006 maybe. I think I saw him in Ireland I went over to Belfast to see a Lizzie show, and we spoke there about me possibly licensing his albums, because he was getting his albums back from Japan, the Blue Murder stuff, and John Sykes albums. But he decided to put them out himself, I believe, with some help from a guy on. I think he just sells them on the internet now, is from what I gather. So he's kind of went into a cottage industry, John Sykes world, I think.
It's a pity. It's sort of a. Why do you think he's disappeared essentially for the last 10 years? Was he? Did he have stage fright? Is he doesn't have anything left to say, or it's peculiar?
Well, he's. I think John's never really been great on trusting people, as far as I'm aware. I just, when the big deals weren't there anymore, I just think he found it difficult to do something. And he didn't feel as though he wanted to trust anybody, I guess. I don't really know. Because he had everything came to him very quickly and very easily. And I think when that dried up, I just don't think he knew what to do. He had rang me and asked me, even after Whitesnake had finished, I remember when there was a Best of Thin Lizzy came out, and he rang me saying, "How do I get my royalties?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know, John. You must have a contract with somebody. Read that, it'll tell you on there." Like many musicians, he didn't really, great musician, but as far as business goes, didn't quite know what to do. So I guess, maybe his phone stopped ringing. I don't know. I'd heard there was a couple of bands came along and asked him to do something. I think even in recent years, I believe there was some LA super band going to get together, and he was supposed to be in that. And then I heard he'd fallen out. Obviously he works at his own pace, I guess, and I think he's more comfortable working with himself, which is good and bad. But it's good in the fact that you can do everything you want, but bad in the sense that there's nobody else there to say, "Hey, do this or do that." And now, I don't know, because as I say, I've not spoken to him for 10 years or something, so I really don't know where his head's at or what he wants to achieve, if anything. I thought he was doing another Blue Murder album, last time I heard anyway, but I don't know if that happened.
That would actually be great. 1999, you rejoined Tygers of Pan Tang for a very special performance at Wacken. Talk to me about that day, that event, and why didn't you carry forward with the band? Why are you not the singer now, for example?
Well, good question. I don't know. You have to ask Rob Weir that. I was always kind of involved with the Tygers right the way through. Even though I'd gone in 91, I went to London at a band called Lionheart for a while with Dennis Stratton, who just left Maiden, and there was a few other guys, Steve Mann on guitar, Frank Noon, who had been in Def Leppard on drums, and another bass player called Rocky, strangely enough, on bass. We did some demo work, and I was living at the Townhouse in London, which was Branson's recording studio, Virgin Records he had at the time. And I did some solo work. I did a solo album, but even when I was doing the solo album, around that same time, I got all the demos together, which I mentioned to you, that the Tygers had recorded with me prior to the MCA deal, and I put that out as an album called First Kill. And Rob and I had got back together because Rob had also come out of the Tygers prior to that. So we got together and called ourselves Tiger, which I don't know if many people know that, but we did, with the idea of recording an album, because we were the two songwriters on Wildcat. I know the four names are on there, but it was essentially Rob and I. And we wrote an album, which I think was going to be called On the Prowl, if I remember. I can't quite remember, but that was going to come out. Now, on First Kill, there was a Tiger track on the end. So I had all these Tygers Of Pan Tang demos, and right at the end, we put one of the tracks we'd finished on this album. And Rob and I were supposed to, we found a band, we were going to go on tour, but then Rob didn't go. He wouldn't go. And when I asked, he'd lost it. He just couldn't get up on stage. Couldn't do it. I thought just lost his bottle, I guess. So he was working as a goldsmith at the time, because he was also working in jewellery. That's what he used to do before the Tygers even started. So he's kind of working in that, and as I say, he went on to basically punching tickets on the local metro train stations after that. But I went on tour as Tiger, and had all these guys, and we did this thing, so which included Tygers tracks, of course. And then Wacken Festival was just kind of establishing themselves, big German festival, and they said to me, can you ask all the guys in the Tygers if they want to get together, 20th anniversary, we'd love to have them on, a headline this Saturday night on the main stage. I was going, yeah, great. So I rang the old management, who promised that they would contact all the band, which they told me they did, and apparently none of the band would do it, but Rob Weir would do it. He was the only one, apparently, who said yes. Now, I went back to the promoter and said, look, there's only Rob and I want to do it, so it's no good, you know. And he goes, no, you and Rob wrote Wildcat, that's great. Why don't you two do it? And just get some guys in. So I brought some other guys in. We had the Blitzkrieg guitarist at the time came and joined us for the show. And we brought in two of the guys I knew to play bass and drums, which were known to me locally. We did that show, and we put the album out as well. It came out on the live album came out in America only on Spitfire Records, which was a subsidiary of Eagle Records out of the UK, and that was it. I mean, I went there with a full understanding that it was a one-off show celebration for our 20th anniversary, but unbeknown to me, Rob had other plans after that, and decided I'd got him back on stage, essentially, quite frankly, and I think he thought, hold on, I can do this. And he took it upon himself to, after that, to put a band around himself and call it the Tygers Of Pan Tang. Why he did that, I don't know. He certainly didn't ask any of the band. And he's done it ever since. I thought it would just be a short-lived thing. I don't really know, but it's kind of gone on now for 15 years or something. But it's upsetting, really, because obviously it negates the situation with the band becoming. I mean, if we ever wanted to go out again as a celebration, it's a bit of a problem because there's this other Tygers Of Pan Tang going around. So I'm quite annoyed with him that he did do that. But there you are. Nobody really spoke in the band. You see, we all, as I say, when we all split up, we all split to the five winds, and we never really spoke since, quite frankly. And it's only, in fact, this year that I've spoken with the bass player, Rocky, for the very first time since 1980. We contact each other through Facebook, and I said to him, what's this? What's going on anyway with this Tygers? I mean, I guess you okayed it with Rob to do this? And he's like, no, I didn't. I thought you did. I said, no, I didn't. And so we worked out that nobody did. But of course, we all had quite high careers. I mean, obviously, I was running Neat Records. It's very unlikely, had I been asked anyway, that I would have done it, quite frankly, because I had far too much on my plate looking after Neat Records. Rocky was, as I say, a big time solicitor. I mean, I think he's the head now of some company who has like Arista as one of his accounts. So, it's a musical lawyer. Brian, I believe, I think he lives on Brian the drummer. I think he owns a donkey farm in the south of England, because I know I got a card off him once with a lot of donkeys on the front. And he talks about donkeys online, so I guess that's what he must do. And John is, John's John Sykes, whatever, I don't know, he lives in LA still, I guess. So it was just, it was just Rob was able to do this, and he did it. So it's a shame, that he thought he could do it, and I mean, that's why I could have gone out and called myself the Tygers of Pan Tang, but I wouldn't do it because it's disrespectful, I mean, if I ever did anything like that, I'd seek the permission of all members. I mean, the only reason we did that 20th anniversary show was because I'd asked all the members and they'd all said no. So we did it as a celebratory thing, or I thought it was just as a celebratory thing for the 20th anniversary of the release of the first single. But so I as I say, I'm running Neat Records anyway, as I say, and then Metal Nation Records, and I've had a very successful time there, and it's been very lucrative and enjoyable for me. But I know in recent years there's quite a lot of interest now in the new British heavy metal again. I've noticed, and the bands that I was looking after, who maybe 10 years couldn't get arrested, are now going out for substantial fees, and there's a big interest again in those bands. So I've started playing again as well. I mean, I did a South American tour last year with Blitzkrieg, doing a few Tygers numbers, just as Jess Cox. And I have always gone out as Jess Cox, I guess, dotted over the years, all the solo album and everything. But a lot of times I would get up with bands and do one-offs, just a Tiger song at the end. I know I've got up with Holocaust and Savage and Blitzkrieg over the years, just to keep my hand in. But last year I did the South American tour, and I did some Irish and European dates this summer. And now, as I say, I've just done a big UK show called Hard Rock Hell. And there's talk now of me going over to America next summer they're looking at, as part of the Milwaukee Metal Festival in July, and then putting some dates around it. So I'd love to try and get into LA and New York and a couple of shows in Canada or whatever. So that we're just talking with an agent now about that, but obviously that's just going to have to be as a Jess Cox thing, because obviously I cannot really go out as the Tygers of Pan Tang. It would just look stupid. But essentially I'd be doing Tygers tracks. Obviously I do a couple of things from Lionheart and a couple of things from the solo album, but essentially it'll be Wildcat. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it'd be nice to think that we could have, got the band back together and did a few shows this time in our lives, but I'm not sure that can happen now, really.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine what a new wave of British heavy metal tour or festival could look like. I mean, you could still go out with Diamond Head and Venom and Girl School and Grim Reaper and Tigers and Saxon. I mean, any promoter, I think, would love to see that. Let me ask you, you mentioned a one-off. I want to ask you sort of about this infamous one-off you did in 2003, again at Wacken, singing for Diamond Head. Talk to me a bit about that, because, I've watched the performance online. There's video of it all over YouTube and stuff. You and Brian, the band sounded great together. Your version of "Am I Evil" it sounds very metalish, if you want. What was that all about? Because I know the band had sort of put out this press release saying, well, Wacken booked us, but they really didn't book us, and Sean's not going to come, so Jess is coming. Was it as confused as it seems?
Well, I was booking bands into Wacken pretty much every year year on year. And that particular year, the agents had asked me if I could get Diamond Head, and I said, yeah. So I got in touch with Brian and said, do you want to do this show? And he's like, yeah, great, So the guys were getting it together, but Sean is Sean, and he just, I think, somewhere along the lines where he would play it, but he didn't want to be called Diamond Head, and he didn't want to do any Diamond Head numbers, so that was a problem. And this was kind of like 2 weeks before the show or something. So they were like, oh God, we're going to have to pull out. And I said, you can't pull out, you can't, it's a big show, you need to do this show. And, what the hell, what are we going to do? And I don't know if it was me or them or what. I think they just said, oh, Jess, can you do it? I'm like, well, I can, but I can't learn a full Diamond Head set in like, 10 days or something. You'll have to do a few Tiger things. Maybe we can just butch it together and do something. I don't want to pull out. It looks bad. So, because I was organising it and they were in the show together, we thought, look, okay, let's just do it. What the hell? And that's what we did. It was literally just a spur-of-the-moment thing. And I think I learned, I can't even remember now, I think we maybe did 5 Tigers and 5 Diamond Head, probably something like that. I went down to Birmingham and we did a couple of rehearsals. It might have only been 2, and off we went and did this show. I mean, it went down great. I remember, to be truthful, I thought at the time half these people don't even realise that who I am or anything. As far as I'm concerned, it was probably, this is Diamond Head, and in fact some of the reviews I read didn't even mention it. I think they thought it was Sean. I'm not convinced people took that much notice. It was peculiar for sure. And then this track came out online, which everybody seems to have seen. And but I think there's a whole show of it somewhere. So that was that story, yeah.
well, there must be, because I know Wacken likes to record everything, and just I'm looking at the set list now. There were 4 Tiger songs and 5 Diamond Head songs. I know we said we were going to do 20 minutes, so we've gone way over. But let me just finish then real quick with sort of a rapid roundup. Lionheart, you mentioned a couple of times. It was sort of one show and done, a sort of a one and done. What happened there?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was another horrible disappointment. I mean, when I came out of the Tigers, as I say, the old Tigers management put an advert in the Melody Maker, which was the national music paper of the UK, where musicians traditionally put wanted ads in, and I think they put an ad in there saying, established vocalist, looking for like-minded rock musicians, or whatever, of a high standard, and name musicians. And Dennis Stratton was out of Maiden at the same time, so we hooked up, and I got the guitarist in, Steve Mann, because Steve had come for an audition with the Tigers, same time as John Sykes, and it was between him and John for the job, to be truthful. So the obvious step for me was to bring in Steve Mann into Lionheart, and I think Rocky, the bass player, and Frank Noon were his friends, and he just brought them with him, because I think he was playing in some band, Wildlife or whatever they were called. He brought them with him. So there was our band. So I went down to London, we rehearsed and wrote an album together. all financed by Virgin Records. I was staying in the townhouse, like I say. Virgin were basically financing the band. We went down to Southend, which is a town in the south of England, and we did a couple of warm-ups. I remember we played with Wilco Johnson, and did a couple of warm-ups. We even had Iron Maiden's Lightning Crew down there with us, and then we went in to play the Marquee, which was sold out in London, and we had the Iron Maiden's Lightning rig in there as well, and it was just, I remember, frying to death. We had their crew there helping us, doing everything as well. Now, unfortunately, Dennis he's a bit of an unstable guy. I mean, the Iron Maiden lads did tell me not to work with him, because that's why he'd gone out of Maiden, because of his instability mentally. And I think we'd finished. The Maiden guys are all working for us for nothing, and Dennis was starting to pick fights with them just before the show, because I think the pressure just gets onto him. And I was pretty shocking. But anyway, we went on. We did the show. It was fantastic, and Virgin were about to sign us, and then they decided. Dennis was like, "Oh, we want to do high harmony rock like the USA bands. We want to." I was saying, why? What are you saying? I don't want to do that. I cannot do it. I don't want to do it. I hate harmony rock. I'm not interested. If you don't want, I'm a hard rock English frontman. That's it. And no, this is what we want to do. I said, well, you'll have to do it alone, because I ain't doing it. So we just parted, and I mean, that was literally after. It made me look stupid, because I mean, the thing only lasted about 6 months. And the papers in the UK had a field day, because they billed us as the first new wave of British heavy metal supergroup. And then a few weeks later, here we are on as they do, they put the Tygers on one side and Lionheart on the other, an interview. I had something like The Fur Flies When the Tigers and Lions Meet, something like that. And then I think literally the week after was a picture of me in a headline saying, the supergroup that lasted a week or something like that. It was pretty horrible. So I had to come home, back to the northeast, and very disappointed. Really, very disappointed was the least of it. I think I stayed out of the industry. I decided not to go back. I only got brought back in because a punk band called the Revillos came to me and asked if I would sing a track with them called Devil's Triangle, which then went on to Heavy Metal Records, Heavy Metal Heroes Volume 2. And that's when Neat Records asked me to come back and do this solo album and tour. So that's how I got back into it. And then, but Lionheart was a massive disappointment, I'm afraid.
Yeah, unfortunately. Now, you mentioned the British press. They have been, to me, unnecessarily hard on you. They seem to criticize you at almost every turn. The solo album Third Step was panned by them. They've taken shots at your vocal abilities. Why do you think they sort of have it out for you? Because that's sort of the perception I get just by reading all the different reviews and articles. And what is it with the British press and you?
I have seen some of that, but actually there's a lot of it which was exceptionally good. I know when the solo album came out, the Review and Sounds magazine, which was basically the Bible of the British rock press at the time, gave it 4 stars out of 5, and with a huge picture of me in it, and said, if this is indicative of British rock in 1984, then it's in for a timely and healthy boost. And it was saying, I know there was a live review from Xavier Russell in Kerrang, which said he'd completely underestimated me and is one of the best gigs by a British band he'd seen outside of Marillion that year. So, there's some pretty positive reviews around in interviews, but I don't know. I don't really care, to tell you the truth. I mean, I just do what I do. You know, I ain't David Coverdale. I know that. I don't want to be David Coverdale. Well, actually, no, I think I would be David Coverdale. But I don't really want to be, you know, I hate harmony, hard rock. I come back from a heavy metal, but a punky kind of area, and I sing how I sing, and that's it. You know, I mean, nobody said, oh, you know, Lemmy can't sing. You know, Lemmy's got a distinctive voice, and everybody loved it, you know. But I'm not sure he could do a nice Journey harmony album. So I don't know, just how it is. It's how I sing, and some people go crazy about it, and others, you know, don't. And that, as I say, that really doesn't bother me, you know. It's just you take it or leave it. I mean, some of my favorite singers are actually not real singers, but that doesn't bother me. It's if it sounds good, it's good, you know.
Yeah, and
you know, that's it. I mean, if it moves you, it works, and that's it.
Yeah, and in this day and age, I look for a singer who can't win the X Factor. That's what I'm looking for. So, you know, we'll finish with these two questions because we've been way over schedule. And by the way, thank you for taking this extra time. Third step, you released the album. Is there any chance that we might see it re-released at some point in a digital form or on compact disc? Because you know, you've redone the Tygers of Pan Tang albums with bonus tracks and stuff. Why not re-release Third Step?
Well, it was owned by Neat Records, which I owned, as I said, but obviously I sold Neat Records to Sanctuary, and it was then owned by Sanctuary, which was Iron Maiden's company, as I said also. But that's now moved on again to, I think it's at BMG now. It was at Universal. It might now be BMG. I'm not sure. But so there it sits, I guess. And I can't imagine that they're going to release it any day. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess I could go and license it, but I'm trying to get the license for the Tygers Of Pan Tang albums off them at the moment on a repress, but I've been sitting waiting 2 years for that. So if and when I get there, maybe I mean, the thing is as well, also, I don't know, I'm very English, you know, not like American guys where they sing their praise from the rooftops, which is cool, but you UK guys don't normally do that. They don't normally, it's not a done thing to speak about or promote yourself necessarily. So I think it's always been another band as opposed to me. I've always been working on some other band, you know, like Blitzkrieg. I've done a lot of work on the last 20 years. Well, and I've done tours with all these bands: Diamond Head, Girl School, Praying Mantis, Grim Reaper. I mean, I've had them on tour out around Europe. I mean, I had Blitzkrieg in Japan last week, or last month now. You know, I've had bands in the States. I'm always doing some release. I've got some Holocaust Nightcomers to come out with bonus tracks soon. I'm working on that at the moment. It's always somebody else than me. I mean, it's amazing that I've actually given myself some time to do these shows. I'm trying to strike a happy balance, which I think I'm getting there now, because I do want to keep playing live, because I do enjoy it, and I will do some more releases. So maybe I'll look. I mean, there's a Lionheart album of all these tracks, and there's some great tracks on it, and we never released it, and that may be a possibility as well. I mean, there's the Tiger track, the album that Rob Weir and I did. I mean, there's lots of things sitting around, but I've even found the very first demo the Tygers did, which I've actually got the master reel-to-reel here in my house, and I can't hardly even remember the songs. And I was thinking of maybe speaking to the guys and then getting that digitally put out as a 7-inch single, just for fun, because I think we did it in 1978, maybe 79. So there's things sitting around, so I must maybe look at getting that solo album out and about, because it has a lot of fond memories for me, and there is some good tracks on it. So, I mean, I remember that tour we did on that tour. We played with Def Leppard, not Def Leppard, Metallica. It was their first ever show in the UK. It was in the Marquee. I didn't even know who they were. I remember my agent saying, "Oh, you're going to play with Metallica," and I'm like, "Who's that?" And they're like, "Oh, it's an American band. They're going to be big." And I went, "I never heard of them." And he's like, "Oh, well, no, believe me, they're going to be big." So anyway, we did this show, and all I remember is Lars asking me to sign his drumsticks and things. And but I subsequently met them a few times, and they're absolutely lovely guys. But at the time, I didn't know who the hell they were. But that tour and that album has a lot of fond memories for me. So hopefully, we'll be able to get that album out as well at some point.
Yeah, and I don't know if you call it irony, but Lars has sort of been instrumental in keeping the new wave of British heavy metal in the public consciousness by having talked about Diamond Head and all these other bands for years and years and years. We'll finish with this. Neat Records. Obviously, you sold it to Sanctuary, and they have sort of left it inactive. Blitzkrieg, Raven, Venom, Jaguar, Fist, all the Persian Risk that has the Phil Campbell of Motorhead. Disappointed that they've sort of just let it sit and become this sort of inactive label with this great roster.
Yeah, well, the guy. I mean, in the big world of big labels, it's all about money, really, and they just add into the pot. They saw it there for sale and took it because they could, I guess, and they just put it there, and knowing it has a worth, and it just makes their label richer, I guess, but they possibly haven't got anybody at the label who's looking at this and going, "Ooh, hold on." I'm sure the Venom albums must have come out again since then, I would have thought, but I don't think there's been much else. You're right. My intention was to, because I sat here and thought, well, hold on, I think I'm going to have to do something about this, because obviously, particularly Blitzkrieg, who essentially look after, their whole early catalogue isn't available. Or certainly after, I mean, I've just released, I had to re-record their first album, A Time of Changes, and release it, which I've just done, because I couldn't get my hands on the original album. But there are other albums there that people ask me for, and I must get them licensed. But as I say, I've been waiting 2 years for the Tygers license. My intention was to get those and then start moving on through the catalogue. Because, I mean, Cloven Hoof have been asking me, "Oh, can you get my first album and, put that out?" And I'm doing licenses in South America with some Cloven Hoof things, and those guys are asking for it as well. So I think the idea would be to go and get these. I mean, if the Raven albums are now, I can't believe that. If they're not out, then that's criminal. I mean, Rock Until You Drop and stuff surely would sell extremely well, I would have thought. But and Welcome to Hell and whatever else. I think I'd go and get those. I mean, or license them, I should say. But as I say, I haven't got past step one yet with the Tygers album, so that would be a plan, maybe. Yeah. I mean, for the next few years.
I mean, it's a bit of a pity. You look at the popularity of Wacken and some of the other festivals, Hellfest in France and all. You would think that they would want some of these albums available, especially around those festivals. But and White Spirit that had Yannick Gertz of Iron Maiden. There's just a lot of great stuff, and it's just unfortunately sitting in a vault. And anyway, someday, right? Someday.
Well, they've got Elton John or whatever. You know what I mean? Whoever they turn over, X million, where these things to them, 50 grand or 100 grand isn't probably not worth the effort to put it out. So which is what it might generate, because they've got such huge things to do. New albums by major artists, I guess, whoever the hell that might be. Jay-Z or God knows what. So, it's something that's not on their mind. There's probably not some rock guy there either. It would take somebody, I guess, to come into the label who's au fait with the importance of this catalogue and to go, whoa, what we got here, But maybe there isn't somebody there at this moment. But as I say, I have intentions. So hopefully, as the next few years progress, I can get more of these albums out.
Liberate the Neat Records catalog. There you go. Thank you so much for today. We were gonna do 20 minutes. Here we are, an hour later, and we didn't even dissect the new wave of British heavy metal movement or whatever you want to call it. But thank you. Absolute great pleasure.
Well, no problem. I mean, another time we can talk about new wave down the line. It's not a problem. But hopefully the listeners will find this of interest, and if I am over there in Canada next year, we maybe might even meet a few of them.
Yeah, I'd love to see you over here. I do have connections to a couple of clubs. We had, speaking of Grim Reaper, we had Steve in not too long ago, so maybe we can get you in here too.
I think the same guys were over there at a club last year.
We just had Diamond Head about 3 weeks ago they came and played, so yeah. Time
light all their patches.
Yeah, time to get everybody in here. Thank you, Jess. Great pleasure.
All right, thanks very much.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Yep, bye.
And there you have it, folks, my interview with Jess Cox, former singer of Tygers Of Pan Tang. Certainly one of the most entertaining and informative interviews I have done recently, so a big thank you to Jess for that. Please check me out on Twitter at Mitch Lafon, MITCHLAFON, paypal.me/Mitch Lafon, and Mitch_Lafon on Instagram. Thank you all for listening, and bye for now. Cheers.